I definitely was the kid who sort of heard, I knew about my mother's romances and I worried about them, and I looked at them with a much colder eye than she did. She was much more romantic, and I looked at them with a protective eye, and also with an eye towards, well, what can this guy do for us? You know? So I suppose I was a bit like Miles in that stance. In this novel, when I started, I really had the story of the lovers. I had a sense of the lovers and their story. But I didn't quite know the way in. And it took me a while to figure out, I didn't want to do both their perspectives, and that seemed sort of, somehow that felt claustrophobic and a little bit insular, as if it wasn't involving the world enough. Whereas once I hit on the voice of this kid who's watching this love story, and watching it almost the way he would watch a financial disaster happening, or an earthquake, he's watching it in terms of how it will affect their family when their family's in a precarious moment. So it seemed to me, I liked it because the lovers have their interests, but there's also other people, there's this other presence in the story who cares a lot about what happens to them in terms of the family's safety and protecting his little sisters. He starts out with a walkie-talkie, and then ends up with fairly sophisticated digital recording equipment on his family's phone. In the same way, I think he starts out very, very normally, very innocently, kind of trying to find out what his parents are going to let him do and not let him do. The small, epic at the time, but really average questions of childhood. And he expects to find an answer, even if what he finds out is no, he's not allowed to watch television on weeknights. That's, in a way, a reassuring answer for a kid, because it's a limit. It's his parents' job to say yes and no, and that is comforting and restorative. But that's not actually what he finds. He finds a lot of other things that aren't, shock of shocks. He finds out when he listens to his mom on the phone with her friends that they're not actually only talking about him and his friends. They're talking about their own lives, and he hears things which alarm him. And he keeps listening almost to be assuaged of his concern, but actually it makes the worry grow. Eventually, when he gets this information that his parents don't have, he becomes an actor. He becomes a catalyst in the story, and I like that. I like the way that he never signed up for that. He started out thinking he would be a spy and just glean this information that would pertain to him. And instead he finds out just what he doesn't want to know, and finds out information that doesn't pertain to him, and it drags him outside his life, and he then has to make a choice about what he'll tell and what he won't tell, which will change his family. In writing a love story, I realized that I have much more experience sort of watching lovers than being the lover myself. Most people do, I think, and it's quite a different perspective. I wanted a love story, but I wanted a love story that went beyond the little circle of the lovers. I wanted some people involved who weren't necessarily rooting for the lovers, who had some interests of their own. In many ways, the love stories suffered, in our times, because with no-fault divorce, with the degree of sexual freedom people have, there's a sense of, if something doesn't work, really, what's the big deal? Whereas this added a dimension to me of, so adults are likely to think, well, you'll get over it, grow up, people don't die of love, etc. Whereas this kid is much more raw and new to it all. He's not protected by all these lessons that have been internalized or told to him. He's sort of young enough and uncool enough to sort of say, why, when something goes wrong, and to really feel it very cuttingly and deeply.